Frédéric Leclerc-Rimov was traveling with two of his colleagues, a journalist from BFM TV and a Ukrainian fixer translator. The other journalist he was with was wounded in the leg. Actually, the fixer was okay. According to someone from BFM TV, one of the editors-in-chief, they had absolutely discussed clearly this mission beforehand, evaluated the risks. I'm told also that there was a Ukrainian journalist who was thinking of going on this humanitarian convoy, but who had actually, as it were, given up his place to the French journalists who very much wanted to cover the evacuation of civilians from Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, these two cities in Luhansk Oblast, which are under sustained and intense attack now from the Russian forces.
Russian forces have entered the outskirts of the city of Severodonetsk in eastern Ukraine. Kyiv says its troops are battling to hold their position street by street after days of intense shelling. Severodonetsk is threatened by Russia's push to capture the whole of the eastern industrial region of Donbass. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says almost all of the city's infrastructure has been destroyed and most buildings damaged. It's feared the city will follow Mariupol and fall into Russian hands.
A city under siege. Severodonetsk has been battered by intense shelling for weeks. Now Russian forces have entered the city and fears are growing that it may share Mariupol's fate. Thousands of civilians are thought to still be in the city, the largest in the Luhansk region, still held by Ukraine.
The European nations are facing soaring energy prices and inflation as a result of Western sanctions against Russia. And now, there are rumblings within the European Union on the Russian oil embargo. While the European nation Serbia has finalized a gas deal with Russia, the Balkan nation has also secured a long-term contract with Kremlin. President Alexander Vučić confirmed that Serbia has agreed for a 3-year gas supply contract. During talks in a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, he also added that although he could not share the price at which his government had agreed to purchase oil from Russia, Vučić has assured that the deal is actually in the best interest of Europe.
Taiwan claims that China has made the largest incursion since January. This has added to the latest uptick in tensions. At least 30 aircrafts entered Taiwan's airspace, and Taiwanese fighters say they scrambled to warn them away. China sent 22 fighters as well as electronic warfare, early warning and anti-submarine aircrafts. The issue is that this is the biggest challenge that Taiwan faces. But for China, this is not an issue at all. It considers Taiwan as their own territory, so Taipei calls it incursion, and China calls it military drill.
The US State Department has said it's a mistake for the United Nations human rights chief to visit China amid concerns that the Chinese will not allow proper scrutiny of the state of human rights in the country. The visit is to include the western region of Xinjiang, where ethnic Uyghurs, most of them Muslims, have been unlawfully detained and mistreated. A huge collection of data, including images linked to China's mistreatment of Uyghurs and other minorities, has been handed to the BBC. Now, the information was hacked from police computers, and it includes evidence of a shoot-to-kill policy for anyone trying to escape.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada.
In recent years, over $240 million have been spent on the Wing of Zion, meant to be the personal transport of the Israeli Prime Minister. But after finally receiving approval for takeoff a few months ago, the Defense Ministry has now announced it is placing the plane in storage.
The government decided basically about 10 years ago to start this project, the Wings of Zion, $241 million. It exists, the plane exists. This week it was decided to put it just storage in sort of mothballs and a hangar. And one reason, I think the blame for that kind of has to go with former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's the current government of Naftali Bennett that doesn't want to use it because they see that plane as an example of, they consider the wastefulness, the extravagance of the Netanyahu years.
Mona Lisa and her iconic smile covered in Chantilly cream. On Sunday at the Louvre Museum, a 36-year-old man disguised as an old lady jumped out of a wheelchair and smeared cake on the painting, whilst urging people to think of the planet.
Think of the Earth. There are people who are destroying the Earth.
Witnesses described the event as jaw-dropping, with social media taken by storm with the footage. Thanks to the glass casing, the piece was left undamaged and the perpetrator escorted out by security and an investigation underway.